Welcome to UberCube, the podcast where we discuss all things cube, but with refreshments. This is your host, Anthony Adams, aka UberBear, and I'm joined by my other two hosts this evening.
Anthony, just kidding, it's May. Hello.
Hi, May, and it's Stu. Today, this is another special episode. We are very honored and privileged to be joined by the one and only and no other. Please introduce yourself.
Hey, Cultic Cube here. This is John Terrill, and I'm delighted to be here. Thank you all so much for having me.
Awesome.
Of course.
It is our pleasure, for sure. And today is not just special because we have Cultic Cube on this episode, but it's special because we are going to be showcasing some content about something very exciting for John and the Cube community. So we hope you enjoy this one. It's going to be a banger.
Oh, so John, we'd like to do a little preliminary here. Not too many details involved, but what are we talking about today on today's episode?
Well, today we're talking about an ice cream truck going by first thing.
We didn't hear that.
I love this episode
cream.
already.
Yeah, we don't hear
Sign
that.
me
Well, just go get some ice cream. That's way more important.
We're not here to talk about ice cream. We're here to talk about
No.
Cube. Why don't you tell us what Cube we're talking about?
Cube. Today we are talking about Cartographia.
Nice.
So this is a cube. Yeah, this cube is returning to MTGO in very short order. September 27th through October 4th. It's going to be on Modo for everybody to enjoy. So this is a cube that's devoted to land synergies, to enchantments, to artifacts, and it's a world to explore. And this is its second foray. So it's coming back with a vengeance and with lots of new edits, lots of new ideas, and lots of awesome people who are contributing to the testing and feedback on the cube, such as, for instance, you three fine hosts of the UberCubePodcast.
Thank you.
That was our pleasure.
It was definitely a fun testing time.
Yes, it was.
Well, before we go any further into the plane of Cartographia, we're going to do the thing that we always do here at UberCube, and we're going to enjoy our refreshments of the show. Let's start out. John, what are you having this evening?
I am having an Irish single malt. It is a Sexton. It's got a fancy little skeleton gentleman in a top hat on
Nice.
the label, and it's quite nice.
I'm incredibly jealous.
Yeah, we went to Ireland
I'm
back
very
in
jealous.
April, man, and good Lord, I was
saw your
the guy
pictures.
going into the Irish pub, asking, "Do you have any scotch?"
The reputation is there for a reason.
They're like, "That's in Scotland."
Yeah, but the quality of what you're going to get there is
It was
just off the
glorious.
charts.
So,
Like,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
so good.
How about yourself, May? What are you having today?
I am having a Pseudo-Sue Pale Ale, and it's brewed here in Iowa, and it is an IPA.
Nice.
Call me impressed, but oh my gosh,
Local choice.
Yeah.
Local choice,
We got to try
always.
some of that. You got to bring that to CubeCon.
Anthony, what did you bring for us today? Because we're sharing one.
Twinsies, a Pernicious by Wicked Weed Brewing, hazy IPA.
Beautiful.
Delicious.
All
Let's crack them open. Let's get to the
Crack 'em
top
open.
and talk about this Cartographia cube.
All right. Cheers.
That nice good crack.
right. Cheers.
All right, so before we even go into the cube, I feel like we've been doing a severe injustice not to talk about the designated art you have as the front facing of this cube. Would you mind talking about this card and how this really inspired you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the patron saint of the cube is Cartographer, and in particular the Donato Giancola art of Cartographer. This card, I'll read the card, I guess. So here's Cartographer, everybody. It's a creature townsfolk for 2 and a green, and she's a 2/2, and it says when Cartographer comes into play, you may return target land card from your graveyard to your hand. So
Pretty
this
cool
may not
effect.
sound like the most exciting card necessarily, but it's a card that supports it plays so well with some of the themes that we're trying to push in this cube. Doing fun things with lands, recurring lands, destroying other people's lands, destroying your own lands sometimes. So Cartographer plays wonderfully in that space, and I just love the art. I mean, Donato Giancola is an amazing artist, always, and this art is particularly compelling, I think.
Yeah, that art is stunning. It's a great choice. I love it. I think it really embodies what you're trying to do with the cube.
Well, let's lead into that. What are you trying to do with the cube? Because something we like to talk about is the inspiration.
Yeah, John, what is your inspiration for this environment?
Well, this environment got its start back in 2022 when first WotC and then later Daybreak. Well, first WotC approached me about doing a cube on Modo. So I had run a cube on Modo in the past, in maybe 2019 or 2020, something like that. I had a cube which I branded the Cultic Cube for the name recognition, you guys.
Yeah,
That
gotta
ran
plug
on
it every
Modo.
time.
Absolutely.
So
always
once he
Every
reached
chance
out,
you get.
yeah, once he reached out to me about doing another foray on Modo, and they had some ideas about what they wanted. They were sort of general ideas, but they wanted something that was going to be a sort of modern-ish power level cube.
Mm-hmm.
So they were planning to run this on the heels of a legacy cube. And they have their own sort of in-house vintage cube, as well, we all know, that they continue to develop. So they wanted something that was operating in kind of a different space. And they wanted it to wanted it to be novel in certain ways, to explore some themes that they hadn't explored too much on Modo yet. And that was kind of the brief. That gave me a lot to work with. And my immediate thought was lands.
Mm-hmm.
I want to do fun things with lands. Lands, I think, are super important in a draft environment. You all know this. You all talk about this all the time. Encourage people to put an adequate density of fixing in their environment. That's something people skimp on sometimes. So
I know I definitely don't draft enough of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, just because you put it there doesn't mean they're going to draft it, but it's not your fault.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. But if you put enough of it, like they kind of got to take some, right?
They gotta.
Put some lands in there. So I bang on about this all the time, of course, as well. But I love lands, not only because they allow people to play Magic when you have fixing lands, and that's super important, but also drafting lands. And you'll hear the ice cream truck.
No,
but I really
I
want
hear
an
it
ice
now.
cream now.
No.
Can you run
I
them
know,
down,
I'm
Man, I
please?
fine.
sure
for
am
one.
craving
Yeah,
ice
go.
cream.
Here it comes again.
Happy to wait.
It's going back around the block.
Yeah, are you taking online orders?
Yeah, ship it to you all. So I bang on about this all the time, but lands are important for making more picks matter. So when you're sitting down at the draft table, you're drafting typically 45 cards, right? You're going to end up with in your pool. And typically you're going to end up with 23-ish of the cards in your deck, right? That are spells and not lands. So the more lands you can draft, the more picks you're unlocking. Like you're making more picks matter. And that's super exciting to me. So this was really the starting point for me in designing this cube. I wanted a ton of lands. I want lands that not only fix, but lands that do things, lands that function as spells, and that allow people to make more picks that are going to matter when they're building their decks.
Yeah, I think there's a direct correlation between the volume of lands to the fun factor that a player has to the win rate that a player has. I mean, these are all direct corollaries.
I like playing spells.
If you have that density, you play the game that you showed up to play while drafting. It's the quote unquote mana screw that gives a false representation of a cube not functioning. Right. And like we said before, you can't lead your drafters to draft the lands, but if you saturate enough, 15% or more, then you kind of given your players limited options and they're going to take them. The more they take, and the more lanes open up, the more more fun they have, the more playability they have, increases their win rate. I mean, there's no study, there's no science here, but I think everybody's nodding their heads in a very visual manner on our Discord that just is a direct correlate. May has something to add to that.
Yes, one thing that's particularly interesting about this cube, and I promise that it is a relevant segue from us just talking about lands for the next 20 minutes. What's interesting is that lands are such a huge focus, along with a lot of other card types in this cube, and a lot of these card types matters type of effects. And I think that it could be interesting to let you talk about kind of what archetypes that we're expecting to see in here.
And if you don't, I got a quick segue as well, just before we get to the archetypes, as segue seems to be a theme. Was there any legality restrictions that was placed on this cube? So obviously, WotC approached you, Wizards of the Coast you're talking to them, you're going to have this cube that's going to be featured on Magic Online. Was it predicated that, that it had to be either standard legal, obviously not standard legal, but maybe modern legal, vintage legal, legacy legal? Was there any kind of stipulation that was placed on the cube and some restrictions that you had to work around through the design?
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good question. And no, the prompt was just that it be a sort of modern-ish power level. But they weren't restricting me to a modern card pool necessarily. I mean, they didn't want a powered cube, so there's that. So I guess I was restricted in the sense that we're not putting Moxen in here, right? But no, apart from that, there was no issue with card legality with respect to various formats. But there were issues surrounding legality in various ways, in the sense that, well, firstly, as I discovered back in the first iteration of this cube in 2022, there's a whole slew of cards that simply haven't been programmed for Modo,
Mm-hmm.
So a bunch of cards they excised. They said, sorry, we don't support those cards, and we don't have the bandwidth to make those cards happen just for this environment, right?
Interesting.
So that was one thing. And this is, as you might expect, this tends to be centered around EDH specific cards that have been printed in Commander specific product, right? Those are often the ones that aren't supported well. And then the other issue, which surprised me, but also made me happy, was I learned that WotC they refuse to put in a cube art by certain artists. So as an example of this, I had Curdape in the cube originally, because we do have a zoo archetype. Curdape is a single red for a 1/1, and it gets +1/+2 as long as you control a forest. So this is a great, classic zoo card.
Yep.
And so the original art was by Ken Meyer Jr., and Ken Meyer Jr. is great and has not been canceled, not to fear. But this very old art, Ken Meyer Jr. owns the rights of reproduction to. So WotC has to pay Ken whenever they want to use the art. WotC doesn't do it this way with their artists anymore. WotC buys the rights to reproduce the art from their artists. So they didn't want to pay Ken to have Curdape in the cube. There's a newer printing of Curdape that doesn't have that problem, but it's by Therese Nielsen, and WotC's not supporting Therese Nielsen art at all anymore, nor Noah Bradley art either. So there may be some other people like this. So anyway, that was another kind of funny restriction, and hence there's no Curdape in the cube, you all.
Yeah,
Wizards, get on that secret layer zoo. We want to see it. Just give us
right.
the whole list of.
I'm looking forward to the
classic
Cultic
zoo
secret
cards.
lair. Let's go ahead and do it, right? All Curdape.
That's all we need.
All Curdape.
Yeah.
So circling back to
Going ape.
May's question that she had asked about the overarching archetypes. May had specified, what are the 40,000 foot archetypes for the players to expect when they see this come online?
So there's 3 major buckets. One is lands. There's a lands bucket, you all. So lands can matter in lots of different ways, and we can explore those maybe at another moment. But so then the second bucket is enchantments. There's an enchantress series of decks. We can build around enchantments in a number of different ways. And then there's artifacts. So this is getting at, as May quite rightly pointed out, we've got this sort of typal matters theme in terms of these big types like enchantments and artifacts and so on. Yeah.
Typal is fun.
Yeah. And then
Typal is really fun.
And then there's definitely derivative subtypes or subgroups that come out of those. That's what's really neat when you do the silo of 3 that you did, but just by the addition of cards, you will, even if you're not doing it purposefully, you will wake up new archetypes by the addition of a card. Sometimes as a curator, you will get that aha moment when you added a certain card and you're like, oh my gosh, I can totally build around this. I can do some kind of unique synergy if I add XYZ card, right? So that's how kind of through that, with that 3 major silos, you still got the domain / zoo, which is a nice combination there. And then you have an aristocrats, a sublight kind of situation going on as well. But those just kind of happen through proxy. That's what's so neat about this design.
Well, we were talking about that when we were pre-gaming a little bit about zoo as a great example, right? Domain zoo has kind of taken over the whole zoo archetype in a lot of formats, because now you've got this incredible value that you're getting again from just having basic land types out there, which is relatively easy nowadays with triomes and fetch lands and shark lands, and then you've got all these payoff
the land
effects.
cyclers.
Yeah, exactly. So now you've got so much payoff from having those archetypes. So it's and being able to meld them together is really fun. And that's, I will say, not going into too much detail, but it's one of the things that I loved so much about this cube. Was really cool.
So one of the interesting things to really put it in perspective as we went for the overarching design, as we went through those three major silos, is that the land quantity, to really put it in perspective for the listeners, is there's 92 lands plus double-faced modal cards that have land types. What was your design thoughts when you added those? How frequently do you add them to the environment, John?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're going in hard on lands. Also, just to say, we've got double fetches in this environment. And this is not that unusual, I don't think, in 2023 for cube design. But this is something that I've been championing for many years now. And when I ran my first cube on Moto, I got to tell you, I fought tooth and nail to get double fetches in that Moto environment, because this had never been done before on a Moto cube, that singleton had been broken. So it's been an increasingly easy sell subsequently. So in every cube I've run on Moto, I've broken singleton for lands. So that's a good thing, I think, for all of us as cube designers. So we go in very hard on lands. We want fixing to be great, but we also want lands that do lots of things. And the MDFC lands, the modal dual-faced card lands from like the new Zendikar block, man, what a boon those are to designers everywhere. I love those cards so much.
They are definitely pretty great.
Oh, they're so
not so
good.
great for your sleeves, but pretty great.
Well, this is true. This is true. But hey, we're on Moto here, you all.
Yep.
So what does it matter?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a fair point. No, you got something that's an island when you need an island. It's not literally an island, probably, but something that taps for blue. Or you've got something that is, a creature, or it's a spell. That's amazing. So these are just increasing the fun, like Anthony was talking about earlier, I think. These kinds of designs, modal designs, I mean, this is another thing you all have talked quite a bit about, of course. Modal designs give people more options and more fun, more control, more things to do. So I really like increasing modality specifically around lands, since this is an environment that's so invested in exploration, and you're supposed to be thrown into age of the tall ships, navigating the great oceans and the seven seas and so on. So land is important here.
I agree. So are you all familiar with Maury Povich? I don't watch it very often, but he's kind of coined this thing. You are not the, well, I've been doing this thing lately with Find My Combos, right? UberCube, right? And our good friend ChillMTG did a video on this, so I'll give a shout out and I will add it to the show notes. But I've been using the Commander spellbook. Every time I get a guest on, I run the Find My Combos. And I actually kind of missed this one. I swerved this one a little bit with McDarby. When we spoke to him, we actually found some after the fact. Whenever we announced X amount of combos, I found some more inside of his Live the Dream Cube, right?
Yep.
And he's like, oh, neat resource, right? So I did run this on yours. I was curious. And you have none. You are not the combo.
No, I am not the combo. Yeah, fair enough. This is, again, a sort of modernish power level, and not that precludes combos entirely. So that's good. That's what we're going for here. There's also, this isn't the same topic at all, but it may be sort of tangentially related. There are 0 planeswalkers in the environment. So I want people to be able to accrue value in different ways, to build engines, to embrace their inner Jenny Johnny. So there's lots of ways of accruing a great deal of value on the board, but it's more through interactions of cards, but not in a sort of auto-win combo sense, which, is what we're talking about here. So I've never liked, even in my very high power cubes, I've never liked A plus B combos. So like Kiki Twin, I don't know. I don't want to hate on the person who loves Kiki Twin and that sort of thing. That's awesome. That's great. And I love playing those kinds of cubes too, but it's just not the kind of environment I want to design myself, because I don't really like the the high roll, oops, I win kind of feel to the A plus B combo.
So that was quite deliberate, would you say, from a design perspective? I mean,
Absolutely.
there's just none of those. No, like, as you say, I mean, Kiki-Jiki is such a great example, right? It's a combo card. Yes, I suppose you could argue that it has value, that you can tap and create a copy of a creature, but it is a combo piece. It's putting cubes to be a combo piece. So it sounds like that was a very deliberate design idea or a design option that you decided, like, I just don't want that kind of environment. I don't want people going infinite and just winning the game.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, this wasn't true in the last iteration of the cube. In 2022, I did have Dark Depths and then like Thespian Stage and some ways of doing the Dark Depths thing, right? And getting that turned on faster. And the reason I had it then, and I was so torn in 2022 because I was really looking for more ways for lands to win, since lands are such an important theme, and Dark Depths is like, one of the quintessential ways to have a win con on a land. But anyway, this time I just scrapped it because, A plus B combo. I regretted it in a certain sense. I was sort of sad about it, but then on the other hand, it felt like it was truer to my own design sensibilities to leave Merit Lege by the wayside here.
One thing that I'll add that it is very nice that your cube doesn't really have false flags for those combos. I find that it comes up sometimes with things like Pestermite as an example. It's already just a good limited card, but sometimes people look at it expecting to find that Kiki combo, and the problem is that a lot of environments don't have that, and you don't really have that false flagging part of it. You have lots of powerful cards, lots of good signposts, but none of them are false flags.
I think you can mitigate some of that, though. David McDarby mentioned this is through communication. So if you had a card like Pestermite, which is a fine card all on its own, it should not unfairly, to the Pestermite signal Kiki combo, right? Pestermite's just a fun card. And I would say the same with something like Thespian Stage. Thespian Stage is a fun card that maybe you want to just make another duel or make another fetch and sack it or whatever nonsense you're doing, right? But it kind of gets pigeonholed or siloed into it becomes part of this combo. And I think it creates like this false roadside flair, but I think it's doing the card a little bit of injustice. And I think we can mitigate that through maybe having that list. Like May just said, okay, hey, everybody, Pestermite is inside of the cube. It's inside of Cartographia. It's not, but what if it were? But you cannot expect to find Kiki-Jiki in here.
I'm going to agree with May, though. If I'm drafting a cube and I see that, right, I am going to expect to see Kiki-Jiki somewhere down the line, right? Yes, you can talk about communication, but I'm going to expect that. I think there's certain enablers, and if we wanted to just maybe talk about that Dark Depths combo, something like Elvish Reclaimer, which is a good card that fits into that, but that isn't a card that necessarily I'm going to see and think, okay, that's definitely a card that has to fit within that archetype, right? On the flip side, you could talk about something like Vampire Hexmage, which really is geared towards something like that. If there's no battles, which, there's...
Planeswalkers.
Even against Planeswalkers, I think is incredibly linear. I think if you're taking back Vampire Hexmage, it's because you're either playing battles or you're trying to get Dark Depths and trying to make that Merit Lage token. If they're not there... I think that's fine, but I think there's some care that you can take in, as May said, some of those signposts.
So here's your curveball question that isn't on the list. Congratulations, you get the May certified curveball.
Is this going to John because I do not have a glove? It's going to John. I don't have a glove. Not ready.
Do you think that Walking Ballista might be a false flag for that?
Oh, I don't know. I don't understand it to be so that is a card that you can combo off with in various ways. That's very true.
It's Heliod, I guess. For me, KCI.
Sorry, what's up?
Heliod and KCI, I apologize, but I think that's what she's signaling, but yeah.
Right. That's very true. I don't know. Like that, honestly, that hadn't occurred to me. I mean, not that it hadn't occurred to me that Walking Ballista is not a combo in certain situations, but to me... that Walking Ballista, unlike Vampire Hexmage, as Stu just mentioned, is not a card that to me signals an incredibly narrow application. And to me, Walking Ballista is a generically good card. I mean, a very good card. I mean, it's a high pick card, I think, even outside of any kind of combo stuff. Yeah.
I just wanted to bring it up because it is there.
Yeah.
It could be a false flag.
Well, I think when like
mention
Stu signaled Vampire Hexmage, that would take up slot equity in a cube. As a curator, we all know that that card outside of battles and the Marriott Lage Dark Depths combo really doesn't serve a purpose. So we'd just be taking slot equity for a vampire that does a whole lot of nothing. That doesn't apples and apples to Walking Ballista in my mind. So they're not the same. They're not samesies.
Right.
No.
Well, and so the signaling issue is a real concern. So I'm glad May brought that up. And this was a concern that you all raised in testing as well. So there were certain cards that could lead a person to misunderstand the environment. So one example is Sprite Dragon is a card that I cut this year. And Sprite Dragon is a blue and a red for a fairy dragon who's a 1/1 flying haste. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Sprite Dragon. So to me, this card was a fine artifact aggro card.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what it's sort of intended for in the environment. And it does a heck of a job beating down, in that deck. It's a very good card. And then it also interacts with +1 counters, which maybe we care about. So, cool card. But I believe you all brought up, and others in testing as well, that this was a card that could be misunderstood to signal that there is a spellcaster's, spellslinger's archetype where we just go in hard on instants and sorceries, and somehow this pays off in a big way. There's no like Talrand in the cube and never has been. There's not any of the... So to me, spells, instants and sorceries are generically good. I mean, I love instants. I'm a blue mage, what I want to do is cast spells.
Careful
for
if you
goodness
confess
sake.
that too.
Yeah. So I love that stuff. But to me, at least in this environment, we don't need a payoff for casting instants and sorceries. It's just a good thing to be doing. So you all pointed out that Sprite Dragon could lead people to imagine that they can go in on Sprite Dragon, get a bunch of instants and sorceries, and then find some more payoffs that are going to, make the instants and sorceries count even more somehow. So I take that point. And so that was a card that I cut, precisely for these signaling concerns that you all have outlined. And look, this is a cube that's appearing on Moto, right? So we as cube designers, when we're meeting with our, weekly cubing groups and whatever, we can explain to our players what we're doing, what our objectives are, when we're making changes, how the changes are going to, impact the environment. When we're tinkering with the archetypes that we're trying to support, how that happens. And I think that's good for us to do, to brief our people. But look, it's a Moto cube, and I'm going to be writing an article about the cube, but how many people who play the cube are going to be reading that article, So we have to be even more careful, I think, in this particular instance about signaling than we might otherwise.
Yeah.
Context absolutely matters in this situation.
It does.
Yeah.
And I think this begs a good question. And as I do from time to time, I like to pose these questions. I've come up with something on the fly. Is, as you all, cube designers, curators of the highest order, how do you sort of battle, right, with cards like Sprite Dragon that is or can be viewed as a signpost card? Because I do agree that I would look at Sprite Dragon and think maybe there is that Spellslinger, Spells Matters archetype in this cube, and I'm going to be incentivized, and not just that I'm incentivized with this card, but with other cards in the cube where I can put them out. Talrand is a phenomenal example. Cast a bunch of instants and sorceries, get a bunch of value, and that's going to be an archetype that is going to, lead me to victory. That, or just a great value piece. And obviously this is a 540 cube, and I know, Anthony, you and I have talked about the density, and when it gets to the point of just how optimized your cube is, right? And I think this matters regardless of what the format is, right? You can talk about cube, you can talk about Commander, Modern, Vintage, Legacy. Now you're talking about that real finite optimization where you're looking at cards like that are not just signposts or value cards, but they maybe occupy a little bit of that space. And Anthony, John, Anthony, tell me.
Mine's plain and simple. I use a 10% rule on density check. That's not perfect. It's plus or minus 5%. I'm not going to claim that works. But if I'm going to have a card that signals, i.e. aristocrats, I feel like I should have 10% of the cube carry that card and give it its worth. Else it becomes, and this is off the topic, it would be along the lines what you said about Vampire Hex Mage. I'm not going to run that card as a one-off without a purpose. Now, that doesn't really qualify under the same sphere of influence that you said with the 10%, right? Because it's looking for a couple of very specific battles.
It's not a good enough value card.
It's not. Right? It's a so synergy cards go in a whole different bucket. When you're looking for these very specific 1, 2, 3 combo cards, and people do like to run those. Our good friend Ryan Sachs loves to have those intricate pieces where if you find that web and he's weaving it and you follow that path, you can complete it. But I, as a curator, like to be a little bit more robust in my decisions, a little bit more generic. So if there is a Aristocrats card or a Lands Matters card, I want at least 10% of the cards to support that within my environments. Plus or minus percentages, right? It's imperfect. I'll never claim that's the magic number. John, what do you think about that?
That's a great heuristic. I like that a lot, your 10% idea. I think this is a place where I hadn't thought about it that schematically in terms of numbers, but I love it. That sounds like a great starting point, and I'm curious to go back through my environments now and pick an archetype and start running the numbers, start doing my filtering on Cube Cobra, and see if I'm meeting that bar that you've set. That's great.
Cool. And May, I'm going to follow up now with you.
Mm-hmm.
I understand as a drafter that there are going to be those avenues, there's going to be those signposts, there's going to be those archetypes that are laid out in the overview, in the communication. Here's a bunch of cards that synergize well. But it doesn't always go like that, right? A draft can go in a million different ways, 540 cards, whatever. They all get randomized, all get shuffled up. And there are times where even though I'm looking for those archetypes and I'm looking for, a specific avenue to draft, sometimes I need to go with more of those value picks. Maybe that's kind of what I'm stuck with, after the first pack or first pack and a half or whatever, the avenue that I've gone through isn't working. So now I'm maybe forcing myself a little bit. Well, maybe I do need to go through some of those value cards to just draft a good deck, not even necessarily a synergistic deck. So now how do you balance that kind of necessity of putting value in there while also not putting those signposts and those cards that just really are could be excluded because they might give a bad signal, as an example?
Fortunately, it just comes with game knowledge. There's no shortcut around it. It's understanding that sometimes cards translates certain things to drafters that you might not be considering, and when it comes to those positions that you're in, you just kind of have to reach out to your community, check Reddit, check whatever, and be like, hey, I know this is sometimes used as a combo piece. Does this come up in other cubes? Does it come up in other things? Is this going to lead drafters astray? Sometimes it's fine just to ask. And, emphasis on why John reached out to a bunch of people to have us test.
Worst case scenario, players will fall back on enemy and ally. I mean, it's your basic heuristic where they know Azorius, regardless if there's synergy or not, these cards won't dislike each other quite so much, and you can build a functional deck.
So it's not just draft flyers then.
You can go back to the bare bones if you're falling apart.
Okay, cool. Well, let's talk about that a little bit. Yeah, that's playtesting, May. You kind of smashed it. Let's just say that.
And I did not.
I didn't actually get to play that many games. I had 2 people with connections issues that ended up winning a couple of my matches. But, it's fine. 3 times. We drafted 3 times, that's right. Because we were having some issues. And all 3 times I left with a deck that was pretty good. And ultimately I left with the feeling that Artifacts was the most hotly contested. It was the most drafted. It was the most, I won't say powerful, but the most words hard.
Fun. Interesting.
Brain, come on.
Fascinating.
PogChamp.
Fascinating. Thank you. That's a good word for it.
Busted.
You heard it here from the horse's mouth.
This was like literally, this is like 10,000 pyramid
But-
just now.
2 out of the 3 times that I ended up drafting your cube, and 2 out of the 3 times I picked artifacts, and out of those 2 out of the 3 times, it ended up completely smashing my opponents. No competition, because what ended up happening is that I was able to accrue just enough value to stay alive until I hit my top end bomb and just ran my opponent over. And
Nice.
it definitely came up, and it's why I mentioned to you privately in that testing Discord was
Less
that,
privately now.
hey, this is just a thing that people were particularly drafting very heavily. It's not like I wasn't contested for those pieces. So
Yeah, I did the same kind of thing. I had my favorite deck that I drafted was a mostly vehicles and equipment deck, and I had like Stoneforge and Shurikei. I think it's Shurikei. Is that the name of it? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
And that deck, not only was it powerful, but it was just so much fun. I was straight Azorius, and I had Emery, I had Heliod, look, and Anthony will love this. I had the trains, I had Untethered Express, I had Renegade Freighter, because I love me some trains. And and Bloodforge Ballax. It was very much get artifacts out, get the pieces that synergize and work well, and allow me to run. And like May said, not only was it a strong deck, but it was really fun to play as well.
John, I have a question for you, but I have to hop on the same train that they just did. So this is my first time playing.
No pun intended.
My first time playing Moto ever, and I think I got paired up with T-Pug, Tyler Pug, right? And we both had no idea what we were doing. And so he was asking me, or they were asking me, what should I do? And I'm like, I don't know. I just watched a YouTube video on a couple of these hotkeys.
Yeah.
And somewhere along this match, I don't believe it was with Tyler Pug. I think it was in my second one. People are watching. John Brostoff, Derek Gallen, and all are watching. And we wish to God we had filmed this. I cast
It was a
walking ballista, put in 6 into it for 3/3. Should have been the win. And then it went immediately to my graveyard because I had no idea how Moto reserved your mana over to the left. Oh, yeah. So I learned all about the painstaking part of Moto that night. But that's not my question.
Yeah.
We're moving on past the antics.
Well,
here.
let's just say Anthony's experience with your cube was horrible because he doesn't have any
no idea what I was doing.
how Magic Online works. I've got years of experience. I'm very comfortable with Magic Online, so it was great for me. But we should have filmed that because it was pure comedy.
So, John.
No, well, that was entirely my fault because when I approached each of you, Anthony was like, "I've never played Moto before. Like, I don't know if you really want me there." And I was like, "Anthony, I want you there. It's gonna be fine. You can do it. You can play Magic. Like, you can do it, right? It's gonna.
You
be,
can do
it's
it,
gonna
and
be
I
totally
did,
fine.
and it was still fun. I had a wonderful time.
I set you up for disaster with your walking ballista.
It's okay.
My apologies, Anthony.
I watch YouTube. So my actual question for you, in your mind, as the curator of the Cartographia Cube, getting back to on point with asking John very specific questions about his design. Sure. What is the most powerful deck in your mind? You built this. You're looking at it from 40,000 feet. We can't see this. You're the visionary. What do you see as the strongest in your mind? Which one was the point of concern as you're looking at it? We all do this. We build a cube, and then we immediately flag something in our brain that says, I wonder if they're going to catch this. What were you expecting, or do you expect to be? If players draft it, their win rate's going to be the highest, because Moto players are going to want to know that.
Yeah, right. That's a good question. So the starting point is that in 2022, the deck to beat was Enchantress. And in particular, the card that I got the most people complaining about, saying this was just an unbeatable card, is maybe kind of improbably Sithis, Harvest's Hand. She's a green and a white for a legendary enchantment creature nymph. She's a 1/2. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you gain 1 life and you draw a card. So here's a gold card, right? Who's a 1/2 for goodness sake. She's a prototypical Enchantress card because she draws you a card when you play an enchantment, right? Mm-hmm. But she's also got this little life drip. And, the gold card could be a stumbling block. But in this environment, we've got a lot of great fixing. Like, you can make this happen, and you can get her out on turn 2 somewhat reliably if you want to, I think. People hated this card. People said they just couldn't beat this card because you're like slowly accruing value. you've got this little drip of life. The decks that want to be aggressive, like, can't quite get over the top because you've gained like 5 life off this card, and then you turn the corner, and then you do your like big enchantment thing and you win. So starting point is enchantments. That was the deck to beat last year. This year, I heard you all's concerns about artifacts. It seems like from our testing, we had 24 people, kind people like yourselves, who came and tested. That was amazing. Yeah, so a lot of you all flagged in artifacts as better than enchantments. So I had cut Sithis from the 2023 cube when we tested it. I put her back in because there was some consternation about artifacts, and enchantments seemed relatively weaker, and fewer people drafted enchantments decks than artifacts decks.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what that means in terms of deck to beat exactly. And I should also say that each of these, we've been talking about these 3 big buckets of lands and artifacts and enchantments. You can have radically different decks within each of these buckets. So we don't support traditional aggro like the red deck wins / slide deck or the white weenie deck. We don't support traditional versions of that, but we have artifact aggro in both white and red. We have the zoo deck, which is, beat down, right?
Right.
So this is how we do aggro here. Within artifacts, you can be doing the artifact aggro thing. You can be doing a much more controlling thing that seeks to play a big artifact creature at the end that's going to turn the game around in a big way, like Cyberdrive Awakener is a 6-mana blue card that gives all artifact creatures you control flying, and it turns all of your non-artifact creatures into creatures.
Love it.
So you're like little mana rocks and whatever.
It's a lot of words for wins
with
the game.
flying.
Wins the game, yes.
Yeah, that's how I destroyed both of the times that I drafted it. I got Cyberdrive.
I run that in Uberbear's Artifact Cube, and I run an entire eggs package, and it's super cute. And you have to hit that card to make it happen, but it's cute, and I want to see that. Which leads me to my next question. So, as a curator in my closed, compartmentalized group, the 8 to 10 of us now, our group is slowly growing in the Raleigh-Durham area, right? But now, in the case of me, I exposed my Uberbear's Artifact Cube to CubeCon 2022, and it was Cloud Goat Ranger and All Eyes on Me and Andy Mangold and Justin Parnell calling it live. And oh man, I'm sitting there like, oh my God, they're talking about the oath, collector oath, and all the things, right? Now, how do you feel as a curator? You're next level. Like, I'm not going to put myself with you. You're now putting yourself out to the moto world. Do you get feedback, positive and negative, in terms of players constantly, like in Reddit forums and Discords, etc.? Do they give you metrics on cards drafted, etc.? Say Daylight. Are you going to get any of that data points so that you can make this cube better? Because you have exposed yourself to a wild array of opinions, highly subjective, because you say 24, and of our 24, we all liked artifacts. I mean, you literally picked a guy, hey, Anthony, I'm terrible, but Uberbear's Artifact Cube, I'm going to try to draft him. I got cut on that lane, right? But you picked a bunch of people that like him. You can't, I don't know if you can use that in a blind test as this is the best deck. That was what we were formulating here is the best deck. But you only had a sample size of 24. Your sample size now could be 2,400.
Right.
Right?
Oh, yeah. No, it's going to be hundreds of thousands of people testing the cube, playing the cube. It's going to be amazing. I guess, okay, so first thing, let me indulge me while I put in a plug for YouTube content I created.
Yes.
Yeah, slam that like and subscribe button, you guys.
Don't break your keyboard so you can watch it twice.
On Moto, I had to work for this, but the WotC people finally gave me the data, the playtesting data about that cube. Mm-hmm. And boy, that was a godsend, and I collected a team of amazing friends who are much better mathematicians and statisticians and, computer programmer types than I am, and ran a bunch of numbers on that cube. So I've got a 4-part video series that's analyzing the playtest data from that experience back in 2019 or 2020. Awesome. Yeah. And that was, I mean, oh, it was amazing. It was amazing. So fascinating nuggets, I think, both for Cube designers, but also for Cube players. And it's backed by tens of thousands of repetitions of testing the Cube. I mean, I was overwhelmed and so grateful for that because, like, when do we get that as Cube designers? You know,
I was going to say
I
that's
felt like
data. That's data that 99.999% of curators just are never going to have access to that much data and that much feedback and that many drafts. So that really is incredible. I'm excited to see what are the decisions that you make now that you're going to get all that data. Like that's going to.
I get that encapsulated data of 8 players. That's what we all typically get, right? Is we get the subgroup of 8, and the 8, as we talked about on multiple episodes, and I believe you've mentioned this as well too. They're very preordained in their type of player nature, anyways. So they're either.
Yes.
I'm a Jenny Johnny, and we can do all the psychodynamics if you want to, or psychographics. But at the end of the day, either I like aggro, I like chaos. We have all these personalities. You have your best friend sitting to your left of you that just wants to do wackadoodle stack stuff for no reason, right? You can't account for that.
You.
That is me, yes. And you cannot account for that personality. So I'm curious, whenever you open yourself up to this volume of feedback, how do you process it? It's not only as a curator, but as a person, right? I mean, I've made this joke before. It's inappropriate, but it's there's no such thing as ugly babies, but ugly babies definitely exist, right? I've made that joke before because everybody knows they've seen one. They just don't want to hold, right? You don't want to hold it. But what I'm saying is you as a curator have to process this now. People's subjective feelings. How do you manage that as a person?
Oh gosh, I don't know. After that first foray on Modo, the Reddit remarks were I don't know. It's difficult. I don't think I'm good at this is the problem, right? And like processing the anonymous feedback from the internet and Reddit. Like I fixate on the negative stuff. It was by and large like overwhelmingly positive. So like that's the good thing, right? But then there are some mean-spirited people in the world.
There definitely are.
There are who can hide behind an anonymous username, and fair enough, right? That's fine. But I've got a very difficult relationship with Reddit, in large part because of that first foray on MTGO, where there was some like vitriolic people, and vitriolic to like friends as well. But anyway, that's fine.
But it's okay. I think when people give you suggestions, May does this recently. She gave you. May's the most outspoken as far as, she tells McDarby, was it Paragon Angel or whatever it was, or whatever that angel was, right? But my point is that she says, and I believe in this too, problem solution oriented. So I will never say something to you as your friend that says, hey, this card sucks with no reason whatsoever. It was my feelings, without giving you a solution or a causality, something that you can process, right? Yeah. Here's the reason why, because we talked about a few cards. That was what the good nature of your test group did, is they were, especially Dan Schneider, he was given this, he does a great job of like, this is great, but this would be better. He did this for me today, right? And I appreciate that type of feedback. We've talked about the challenge of a curator processing feedback. It's not easy sometimes, right? Because this is not just your baby. I make the ugly baby joke. This is something you've put your heart and soul into, right? You've designed this. And your whole purpose in life is to bring joy to a large volume audience. And all you are asking for is some critical feedback, but something that gives like, okay, you dislike this card. Please tell me why. Problem solution oriented, and I'll do my best to make it better.
Yeah. Listen, you all had a great episode. This is one of the episodes that really struck a chord with me and has really stuck with me. I don't remember when this was exactly, but on the UberCube podcast, you guys, you devoted an episode to giving feedback to Cube curators, Cube designers, and you had such great advice, among which was, don't just say this card sucks, right? Like, I played this card, I lost with this card, it was just the most abysmal thing. But when giving feedback, explain the context in which the feedback is coming from, explain what you understand to be the problem here in some detail, and also give some alternatives, right? Give some advice. Don't just like flatly, just go around leveling the terrain and saying, this is some terrible, I hate this thing, but instead offer some solutions, offer some alternatives. So I love that advice, and I love that you all gave me some of that advice as well in testing. So thank you all.
I'll do this for a good friend, John, then. So as he takes the boldness, fortune favors the bold, and he's doing a thing that most of us would be frightened to do. He's putting his cube out to the universe, right? The multiverse of the internet, and people are viewing it. So my ask, if you listen to our show, is if you have criticisms, ever so politely, problem solution oriented, so that he can make it better, because that's his total intent. And I am asking that directly of the listeners, please. Fortune favors the bold, John. Fortune favors the bold.
Speaking of feedback, and speaking of our testing group that tested the cube beforehand, what do you think was the most impactful feedback that you got during that testing section, and what stuck with you the most that ended up making changes before its release?
Besides May's remarks.
Yeah. I did everything May said. Yeah, I went down May's checklist, and I was like, check.
There's a reason why we had snagged her so fast. Like,
no,
hey,
you
want to be on our podcast?
I'm being glib, but no, you all gave me awesome advice. I super appreciate it. Let me, I guess.
I know you were not prepared for this question. It's what I do. I'm sorry.
May loves to do this. I'm glad it's someone else besides me, John.
At some point here, I think I posted a list of goals in my revision after our testing. So let me find that real quick.
It's just some playful keeping you on your toes,
Yeah. No, that's
while
awesome.
sipping libations, John. While sipping libations.
And I will say, just to quick, while you're looking for that, I'll follow on.
Cheers, brother.
I appreciate you giving a shout out to that episode, because it is important. When I first started playing Cube, I was so guilty of, I would get wrecked in a draft and I'd be like, this card sucks. This card's nonsense. Get this card out of your cube. Because I just got destroyed by it, right? And it's so easy to have that emotional response to a card or a couple of cards that have just annihilated you in a draft. So then, and Anthony will tell you that months, if not a couple of years after we really started getting into Cube, we sat down and started talking about his vintage cube. And I came out with here's the cards that I don't think are impactful enough for this cube. And here's some choices. But I think it's kind of almost like a curve that I can get to the point now where I think I could say to Anthony, actually, I don't think that card should be in there. But I don't think I'm knowledgeable enough about the history of Magic cards to be able to definitively say, here is a better card. I could go and look for one, but I think having that feedback to say it's an experience thing, right? It's I've drafted the cube enough times, or I'm knowledgeable enough about Magic, or I'm reasonable enough within my feedback, not just some rage post on MTG Cube subreddit or some Facebook or some email or whatever the case may be, especially when it's shrouded with anonymity. Like that feedback has to be
about why artifacts are broken.
Exactly. Like the keyboard warriors out there, there's plenty of them.
And we love you all, but we're giving you advice
most
now.
Most of you. Exactly. That feedback has to be meaningful.
Unsolicited advice is the best advice.
Yeah, I co-sign all of that. That's super important. Put in your show notes a link to that episode. Everybody go listen to that awesome episode you all did. I love it. Yeah, so I guess some of the takeaways from our playtesting was cut individual cards that don't fit themes, or that don't fit themes well enough to pay for their presence in the cube somehow. So like Goblin Guide I had in the cube back in 2022, and I had it for our testing as well. And Goblin Guide, I thought it was super cute because it does stuff with lands, obviously, right? Whenever it attacks, opponent, reveals the top card of their library.
The flavor's definitely there.
I like it. It's flavor all day.
Yeah. But here's a card that is like an awesome card as well. We all know from, the history of Magic. It's a cornerstone to the Red Deck Wins deck. And it also could be misleading in the way we were talking about earlier and trap people into imagining that there's a traditional red deck wins deck, which there's just not, where you need a density of aggressive one drops that are good on their own. And we do have good red one drops, but like they require artifacts, you know?
I would have fallen for it.
Yeah,
I like my red deck
I wouldn't
wins.
even. I would say that is an absolute prime card that I see in a pick in a pack one. I see that card. I'm thinking, right, there is support for hyper aggressive mono red aggro. Give me the Goblin Guide. Give me the Monastery Swift Spear. Give me all the burn spells. And if I don't see that, then I'm thinking, okay, now I've just got a creature that, is efficient, but now is giving my opponents an advantage that I maybe can't overcome with the speed that I expect to get from a red deck wins, like one drop, two drops.
Not me, because it's interesting. You'll see two different personalities here. I see your vision as a thematic designer. You've made a lands-based plane. So I look at this card because I know that Cartographia, just by the term, is signaling an idea, right? Like whenever I say the Monopoly cube as an example, the game Monopoly pops immediately in your brain. And so when you see things that are happening that are Monopoly-esque, it shouldn't really shock you, a dog and a battleship and all the things, right?
I would disagree with that card, though, because that card is an advantage to your opponent for sake of getting a very, very early advantage. There isn't really...
That's the cost.
It is, but it's a cost because you are playing that hyper aggro very, very low to the ground red deck. And that is not just a card that can fit in a bunch of other archetypes. It is a card that is maybe the most significant archetype for that hyper aggressive mono red archetype. So I don't think that's a card that you can just put in there for theme or for flavor purposes.
I think that card's been branded, unfortunately, because I get
for
the
a
dream.
good reason.
I get the dream that, but John, his intent was good. But let's kind of move on to so let's talk about cards that are glue, right? And John, I've got this first one, All That Glitters. Would you mind taking this away? There's some glue cards that I've signaled here. Like when I went through and I cherry picked from your list, I put it in the show notes, which will be included for everybody to see on our Google Drive. I wanted to point out some cards that I thought really bound these different, as he mentioned, the trifecta. That's how this cube is designed. It's lands, artifacts, enchantments. Yes, there are sub themes, but the trifecta exists. And what I was fascinated as I'm signaling cards, because I'm the person who builds the script, I get that pleasure of doing so. I look at it and I go, oh man, okay, I see what he's doing here. He's gluing archetypes together. All That Glitters. Would you mind taking that one away, please, John?
Absolutely. It's 1 and a white for an enchantment aura. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact and or enchantment that you control. So this is a card that, as you say, it's glue, right? We've identified 3 buckets, and here's 2 of the buckets being represented in one card and making one card incredibly good. It's like slightly privileging the enchantment bucket in as much as it is itself an enchantment, so that's nice. But you can throw this in an aggressive artifacts deck, and it's going to be a great card here as well.
Because those two ideas do live harmoniously with one another, right? They both die to the same thing, naturalized, so they're besties. And that's what I like about this concept is enchantments and artifacts can survive.
I would agree. Like this card, and even so, +1/+1 artifact, enchantment. Like this covers so much flavor within the cube. It's dirt cheap. It's 1 white and 1 colorless, like you say. This is not just a signpost card for me, but this is just I'm taking this real high, and I'm going to be able to support multiple different deck choices just with this very, very cheap card, which is, for me, that's a very cool, like, not even a build-around card, just a really amazing support card.
I think it's important that curators find ties that binds between your different... You don't want your archetypes to be islands. I think that's a good design measure that you've done. It doesn't... Not everything needs to have glue. Not everything's going to be a lord for the other... section or typal group, right? But at the same time, you want to bind you want players whenever they start drafting, maybe they fall a little short on the enchantments, but the artifacts will carry the weight with all that glitters. And that's a design aspect that John has taken on. This next one's a card that I actually mentioned in the Discord. And as I mentioned it, I'm going to add it to UberBear's Artifact Cube probably tomorrow after our recording because it's amazing. And it's Tameshi, the reality architect. For 2 colorless and 1 island, you get a legendary creature, Moonfolk Wizard, 2/3. Whenever 1 or more non-creature permanents are returned to hand, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. Then you can pay X plus a plains. Return to land you control. There's that land aspect. And we've got the non-creature aspect. This is really cool. Tie that binds. Return a land you control to its owner's hand. Return target artifact or enchantment. There we go. All the trifecta just formed, right? And 1 card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery. Lots of words, but this card takes all 3 of the pieces of the cube and pulls them into a triangle. I absolutely love everything about this card.
Wonderful card.
Like, if it was ever made for a cube, John, Cartographia is the cube for this.
It's this cube.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
You recommended this to me. I super appreciate it. This was a great recommendation that was not on my radar. And so when I was approaching Cartographia 2023, I was reviewing all of the cards that had been printed since Cartographia 2022. And I totally missed this card because it had been like, I should have had it in 2022. So this is great. It marries all 3 buckets. We've got a ménage à trois among the buckets, apparently. So it's a great.
I'm sorry. Pronounce that again.
Card.
It's prettier when he does it because he's a professor.
It's not because I feel like you pronounced it wrong. I'm just impressed because I'd never be able to.
We've been saying it wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Emphasis on the
it draws all the buckets together. They're having a fine time. Yeah, that's a great thing. So as you're quite rightly pointing out, I think the glue is super important. Whenever you can find ways of bridging archetypes and sub-archetypes and so on, that's an incredibly important thing and super helpful. You all had mentioned Dan Schneider, and he, in this last testing session, he had turned me on to Mondrak Glory Dominus, who's 2 white for a legendary creature, Phyrexian Horror. It's a 4/4. Yeah, it says if 1 or more tokens would be created under your control, twice that many of those tokens are created instead. And then it's got an activated ability for 1 and a Phyrexian white and a Phyrexian white. Sacrifice 2 other artifacts and or creatures and put an indestructible counter on this guy. And this is a card that is a, doubling season kind of card, but on a stick. And this is something that I love as well, because like the Honor of the Pure thing is not a card that I love in Cube because it does nothing on its own, right? But you attach it to a creature, and that's a whole different ball game because now you got something that can attack and block plus give you the effect, right?
Pay 1 for life indestructible. Oh, also sacrifice 2 things.
Right. So exactly. So here's a creature that gives you the doubling season kind of effect, and we've had other cards that do that kind of thing, right? But you've also got a 4/4 for 4, which is more or less on rate. And then it also intersects with the artifact, with the aristocrat thing broadly, but then also in this cube with the artifact sacrifice version of aristocrats in particular. So I'm totally with you, Anthony. I love this kind of card that can marry all these different sorts of archetypes and be doing lots of cool things in, lots of decks.
Yeah, I think it's a great curation technique. Kind of want to move over to our lands matter section. We're going to go through our first portion of the trifecta, or what's the name of the triangle from Zelda there? What's the name of it, May? You can help me out.
The Triforce.
The Triforce. Let's go. All right, the Triforce.
May had a look on her face like, what the hell are you talking about? So I'm like, I'll jump in with that one.
The
Triumvirate.
The Triumvirate, because that's how this...
I'm a Zelda fan. I was more blasphemed by the fact that you didn't know.
I haven't played Zelda since the first one. But
I was more insulted.
So, John, this first one, if you wouldn't mind taking away, is Tatiova, Steward of Tides. I'm a huge fan of this card. Would you mind grabbing this one for the audience, please? And this one brings the lands to life.
Sure. It is a green, blue for a
John,
legendary
I
creature.
have John.
So just say, May, take it away.
All right, May, would you mind taking
Hi, I'm John now. I've assumed your identity.
Let
Nothing
me fix
personal.
this.
May, tell us about Tatiova.
No, go ahead. You should do it, May. You
Go
are
ahead
John
and do
now.
it, other John. Oh, thanks, John.
This is like Mission Impossible. You've got like the mask, and then you reveal it, and then John is May. Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. Anyways, it is a legendary creature, Merfolk Druid, 3/3. Land creatures you control have flying. When a land enters the battlefield under your control, if you control 7 or more lands, up to 1 target land you control becomes a 3/3 elemental creature with haste. It is still a land. Love this card.
Oh, yeah, has flying and haste. That's all. This is beautiful.
Well, Tatiova doesn't have haste.
No, doesn't need
it.
Because that would be really broken.
Oh my gosh, yes, this card's amazing.
But playing that and then getting a land down.
What I do love about this card is the restriction of the 2 forest plus an island. It's made it. Granted, you said you broke Singleton, but it made this card a build around challenge. Right, the players don't get this for free. They have to really dedicate their idea to Simic. I'm a huge fan of that because I've kind of, as a curator, broken away from the pips matter quite so much. I want some of these like Easter egg challenges, right? Where the player, if they work a little harder and invest a little bit more time, they get the thing. This is the thing, right?
I know that I've been working. So Anthony will tell you that I've been working on this on a cube, a Doom cube, for some time now.
It's because of the Writers Guild. It should come out what, 2028?
2029 is probably projected right now. I'm working
The Doom
on it.
Cube coming soon.
But
to store near you.
Another cool idea I had, and this card and the next card, and if you don't mind, I'm going to take this one away as well. So this is Omnath, Locus of Creation. So for red, green, white, blue, legendary creature elemental, when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card, and it has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 4 life. If this is the first time this ability has resolved this turn, if it's the second time, add red, green, white, blue. If it's the third time, Omnath deals 4 damage to each opponent and each planeswalker you don't control. So obviously you can see with both of these cards, they don't have any generic mana. And if there was one cube that I really think I want to start after my Doom cube, it's a no generic mana cube. I don't know if one exists out there. I would be very surprised if it didn't. But I like the idea that, and I will say, I've always been of the opinion that I think there's a lot of cards out there that really should be a little more color intensive than just white, 2 generic, or white, 1 generic, or something. I think this is a design space that Wizards of the Coast really could start exploring a little bit more, or maybe they've almost kind of missed the boat on a little bit with so many powerful effects. I think Omnath is an incredible example. It's a super powerful card, and it has all 4 of those pips. Now, we have fetch lands, shock lands, triomes. We have lots of fixing. And again, John, going back to your cube, tons and tons of support for mana fixing to allow a card like this to shine. But this is a definite signpost for the lands matters archetype in this cube. And this, I mean, not just is it a signpost, I'm looking at this and thinking, well, I'm taking every single land I get from now on.
Yeah, Omnath is a great signpost card, I think. This is, it definitely lets you know that lands matters is a thing. It's a landfall card that counts. And that's not, I mean, that's a sort of rarity. In the same way that domain is a sort of rarity, and that's a sadness to me. I need more domain cards, you guys, and domain cards that are like good, and domain cards that aren't from 15 years ago. You know what I mean?
Shout out to McDarby. Get on that. More domain.
Yeah, get on that, McDarby. Absolutely. Let's call up Gavin. Let's do that thing. Yeah, so Omnath, I love that it is a super sweet landfall card that lets you do all sorts of cool things. It is a color-intensive card. And as you guys probably know, I personally have a real fundamental antipathy towards gold cards as a general rule. I hate gold cards.
Really?
In my environments, I try to minimize gold cards insofar as possible. In 2022 version of Cartographia, I only had 3 gold cards per guild. And in 2023, I've been convinced to expand that to 4 gold cards per guild in the 540. But having said all of that, Omnath is a gold card that is, as you say, Stu, a super awesome signpost for the Lands Matters deck. It's an incredibly powerful card, and it's a great reason to go in on lands and to draft your vegetables in a big way. So I want a few of those cards. And this year I've introduced some 3-color cards as well, which didn't exist at all in 2022. And I've retooled the 5-color cards slightly. So I do want to give some people some reasons to draft all of their vegetables and do some cool things.
Yeah.
Omnath is a super cool reason to go into the multicolor deck for sure.
And obviously, you were talking about Omnath. It's a 4-color card, right? One thing that I really love about the Cartographia cube is and I pay attention, obviously, to all of the monocolored cards, but the gold color cards, and we've talked to a bunch of curators, and they generally tend to gear towards the gold color, the multicolor cards are quite signpost sort of centric cards, right? And if you look at the list, and I will definitely recommend anyone who is interested in this cube, which should be everybody because it's freaking awesome, look at the multicolored list. And when you look at each of the color pairs, it tends to be 2 cards that are good value cards, and then 2 cards that are really strong signpost cards. And that, there's no way that can be by accident. That almost seems like, or it just seems like it has to be so purposeful. And I wanted to ask, that was one of the questions that I wanted to ask you as the creator of this cube. How purposeful was that? Was that those each of those color pairs had each of that, they're just so signpost specific with a couple of those cards that are in there across each of those pairs.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Thank you for asking that, Stu. That's a great question. I think that, so I've got this difficult relationship with gold cards, as I've already said, right? So I don't love gold cards in general. And insofar as possible, I don't want to put single color effects in gold slots because I feel like that's a waste of slot. I guess I'll say the reason I dislike gold cards, or a reason I dislike gold cards, is because you, as a drafter, when you're sitting down at the table, you need to be in that pair. Otherwise, this is a card that's totally not interesting to you. So any single color card has, a 20% chance of being interesting to any given person. The more colors we add to that card, we're decreasing the chance that any given drafter is interested in that card. You know what I mean? And in my experience as a cube curator for the past, 12, 13 years now, gold cards tend to go last, right? So it's been my goal as a cube curator to minimize gold cards to maximize the real options that people have as they're drafting.
That's interesting. Because I would consider myself as a drafter who tends to look at and probably take fairly highly, especially the strong payoff gold cards, not even just because that's an archetype or a lane that I'm really hyper-focused on taking, but especially in a cube like this, where there's so much support for amazing fixing, that heck, I might just get to the point where I'm at 5, 6, 7 mana, and if I draw that card, I'm probably going to have the mana support to be able to get it out. And it's such a bomb that it's going to be either a game shifting or just a game ending card right there by itself. So it's interesting. And I will say that is a style of drafting that I think I'm going to end up take him for the rest of my life. Like those are the signposts that I look for and the kind of bombs that I'm looking for.
That's the subjective nature of actually being a curator, though. It's that your players are doing what Stu just did, where some of them are doing that's a build around, and others are looking for it's spiky nature of optimization, right? They see Omnath and they see a Ponder in the same pack. Stu may take the Omnath and I'll take the Ponder. And you really can't account for that nor predict that. There's no metric that you can really weigh that. It's just the player agency during the draft, right? But Omnath, if you were going to grab it, for me, it's a very build around type of situation. I would want to grab that sooner than later. That's not some players would argue that they want to get all the lands first, and I get that. But for me, I want to get this and then get all the lands to support that.
If that's in my first pack, I'm going to need to see something pretty significant to not take Omnath, especially in a cube. Because obviously, like you said, there's no infinite combos. Generally, most games are going to be determined by creatures turning sideways, and a card that for only 4 mana and a 4/4, which is a good body that allows you to gain life just by virtue of the fact that you put a land into play, and then potentially get 4 mana of 4 colors, which can be great fixing when you're trying to play subsequent spells in the same turn. That's the impact of a card like that cannot be understated. It's incredibly powerful. It's obviously why it's such a strong card in modern. And this is, like you say, this is a modern kind of ish cube, right? Modern power level ish cube. So it makes sense that a card like that would be kind of at the top end.
May, would you mind taking away Blossoming Tortoise as one of the cards it's been adding recently?
I'm actually really excited for this card because
is this going into Fake Cube?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, it's a turtle. It doesn't.
No, I love it. It's a great card. It's just not for the Fake Cube. Absolutely not. Blossoming Tortoise is a 2 green turtle 3/3. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, mill 3 cards, then return a land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Activated abilities of lands you control cost 1 less, and land creatures you control get +1/+1. It does everything that your cube wants to do. In our testing, I specifically mentioned this card when we were talking about whether or not you were going to introduce Wilds of Eldraine cards, and Blossoming Tortoise is that is the key piece of this does everything your lands wants to do.
As we talked about in our little testing group, it didn't look as if we were going to get to include Wilds of Eldraine cards, and I was super bummed about it because, Wilds of Eldraine is out now, you all, right? We're having pre-releases this past weekend before we're recording, so it should be there. So anyway, we got it in there,
and it completely ties into Tatiova. By the way, it just really turns those 3/3s into a 4/4 with Tatiova. Those 3/3s that have haste and flying are now 4/4 haste and flying with Blossoming. Oh my gosh. So good.
Yeah.
The next card, we're going to kind of migrate over to your artifact matter section. We're going to kind of cherry pick a few cards from here, if that doesn't matter. One of them that I would like to talk about is Angel of Ruins. And I'm going to take this one on because it's an Uberbear's artifact cube. This card has done work, John. And I'll go ahead and let me just skip past all what it does right now. And I'm going to kind of do the tie that binds, Plane Cycling 2. Just to let everybody digest that, because John, Cartographia is a lands-based plane, right? That's the world that John has developed. But Angel of Ruins, for 5 colorless and 2 planes, you get an artifact creature angel flying. When Angel of Ruins enters the battlefield, exile up to 2 artifacts and or enchantments, and then Plane Cycling 2 for a 5/7. This is literally the antithesis of the trifecta that this cube is designed around. This is the perfect, I don't want to call it a hate bear, but this card does the work and closes games for the 3 different subgroupings within this plane, Cartographia, that John has designed. And as a moto drafter, I would highly pick this as a bomb because this does so much work. What are your thoughts on this, John?
This is a super sweet finisher in white. It's an artifact, so that has a great deal of utility, right, already. And it is an incredibly large creature in the environment, right? It's kind of hard to wrestle with a 5/7 flyer. So this thing is going to get through quite a bit. And then, as you say, it has this naturalize effect tacked onto it. This disenchant effect tacked onto it, except it's sort of even better in as much as it exiles, because there are ways to recur artifacts and enchantments. So it's a super sweet card. And then cycling, it's only plane cycling, so you have to find a planes. But of course, we've got duels and so on in the environment, so that's cool. But, I love cycling cards because this is just increased modality. Like, if I draw Angel of Ruins in my opening hand, I am extremely likely to be cycling the card and just getting another land drop. I mean, this is going to be dependent on the circumstance, of course. But I love that I can just pitch this stupid seven mana card and guarantee another land drop. Or I draw it later and suddenly I've got this finisher that like wrecks the opponent's board. And the opponent is extraordinarily likely to have some number of artifacts and enchantments, even if they're in the lands bucket rather than the artifacts and enchantments bucket. So yeah, super cool card.
Small side note, but what's cool about the cycling cards in particular is that your specific playtesting group was basically chanting at your doorstep of put Living Death into cube, and then you finally did it. So
Yeah.
this card goes in there.
Oh,
Just-
yeah.
I
Yeah,
just
we
wanted
were
to
all
throw
screaming
that out
like
there.
Living Death.
And I put Living Death in there thanks to you all's wonderful advice. And you all also, you all gave me so much great advice. Like
It's
decrease the
fun and
number
big
of,
splashy plays. People like memorable plays.
That might need to be
Yeah.
a little watch listy early on. I mean,
We did suggest it,
We'll see.
but
I'm just going out on a limb, but that might need to be some caution with Living Death.
It's the fun factor. I run an UberBears horror cube, and it's a memory making card, right? It's a risk reward card.
Yeah.
You don't know, like your opposing player in that environment is also equally potentially putting stuff in the graveyard, and or you're removing their stuff, putting it in their graveyard. So you have to. It's a really calculated risk. I like those cards that force the opponent and yourself to make decisions on the fly, right? You have to do some math. Like, I'm willing to let my 5/5 come up for your 3/3, John. I'm willing to accept that outcome, right? And I as a curator, I think those cards are fun and memory making, and that's what that in the day. That's what we want, right? That's the play style we want. A card that I want to point out. We've already talked about Cyberdrive Awakener, and we talked about that early on in the episode. I'm a huge fan of this card, so I'm kind of pushing through the show notes a little bit, and these will all be included on our Google Drive. But Unctus Grand Metatech. For 1 colorless and 2 islands, you get a legendary artifact creature, Phyrexian Vidalcan. 2/4. Other blue creatures you control have, whenever this creature becomes tapped, draw a card, then discard a card. Other artifact creatures you control get +1/+1. Pay 1 Phyrexian or blue. Until the end of turn, target creature you control becomes a blue artifact in addition to its other colors and types. Activate this ability only as a sorcery. I got to take a Gatorade break here.
So much wordage.
So many words. This card is one that I wanted to talk about with you, John. This card's amazing. I chose to omit this from my Artifact Matters cube, right? UberBears Artifact Cube, because I felt like this card would be perpetual, just repeatable benefits, right? And I think when you're doing this type of design, back to the trifecta, lands, artifacts, enchantments, you have the opportunity to kind of spread the peanut butter, if you will, right? These cards are fantastic, but they're not as good as they would have been. What are your thoughts on that as a curator?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think this is a card that you could take early and kind of build around, like not maybe hardcore build around it, but this is giving some like additional percentage to your chance of picking up blue artifact creatures, right? Like, I mean, it could inform the draft in some way, and I think that's fun, right? Cards that can inform how the draft proceeds, but that don't necessarily cement you into a particular lane, like you have to take card X, Y, or Z. So this is a card that could inform your draft decisions, but it is a card that could be, as you quite rightly point out, I think, Anthony, like there are environments in which this could give you an overwhelming amount of value. And here I have attenuated the number of blue artifact creatures in particular. They exist, but there's not like worlds of blue artifact creatures. It's red and it's white that have the greater density of artifact creatures. So this is like slightly a build around in the sense that if you want the first clause to trigger, it's going to be, some additional deck building constraints. But you can put this in a blue, white, or blue, red deck with a bunch of artifact creatures, and it's going to be this lord that is going to make everything a little bit better. So I think it's a cool card.
Definitely.
You
cool.
could pick it up for value later, or you could pick it up early, and then this could change how you evaluate cards in future picks.
I think this is really a context matters card. If I put this in my environment where it's purely artifacts versus anti-artifacts, this card could get out of control. But in your environment where you're now splitting it into thirds, it becomes less powerful. And that's something that curators can take into account, is that a card on face value becomes devalued by the environmental circumstances, right? In this case, this card in this environment is a third of the power level. I'm not discounting the rest of it. I realize you got all the ties that binds, but it's not as broken in here as whenever I'm doing like this binary type of build, right? In Uberbear's Artifact Cube, featured at CubeCon, which we're going to take a little bit of break here and talk about that. We're going to pause. This is a little bit of a break away from the cartographia. Let's talk about CubeCon for a few seconds. John, let's do some plugs for the CubeCon. You got CubeCon Lite and you got some CubeCon merch. Can you tell the audience about that?
Absolutely. We just announced these today, you all. So I am one of the founders of CubeCon, and CubeCon is a celebration of Cube that has both, competitive Cube elements. There's a main event where people accrue points and get prizes and all that sort of thing. Undying fame in the Cube world. But then also there's a casual component to CubeCon, which is super important to we organizers as well. We very much want to be able to support people who aren't like super spiky and into the incredibly competitive thing. So this is our second year of CubeCon coming up in October 2023. We've doubled the number of attendees to 400 from 200 last year. And we still had a whole bunch of people who weren't able to get a ticket given our cutoff at 400. So we have introduced the CubeCon Lite Pass this year as well. So this allows more people to come and enjoy CubeCon in 2023. And the CubeCon Lite Pass is cheaper. You're not able to participate with a Light Pass in the main event of CubeCon except on standby. So whenever we've got pods that need an eighth person or something, CubeCon Light people will be the people to fill in and fill out that pod. We've got 49 cubes in the main event, including some of you all's excellent cubes, of course. So you all have been talking about the Artifact Cube and the Fey Cube that May has and so on, right? Those will all be so
exciting.
Yeah, it's super exciting. So those will all be in the main event. There's going to be so much Cube happening. So yeah, we introduced this CubeCon Lite Pass to allow more people to come participate in CubeCon, play in our open play area where we're going to have tons of Cube. I mean, people are bringing cubes. But there's also going to be EDH and BattleBox and Dan and all these other fun formats as well. You could participate in the main event if you wanted, if as places appear, and then people with the CubeCon Lite Pass can participate in our other extracurricular events. So Jonathan Brostoff is going to reprise his tour of the Madison State Capitol like he did last year. That's going to be amazing because our friend Jay Bro is a former assemblyman in Madison, like a congressman in Madison. For the state of Wisconsin. Anyway, so there's Cubioki, there's going to be all sorts of awesome events. Yeah, I'm excited about that. I'm going to Cubioki.
There's the Bar Cube. We're doing Bar Cube. We're 100% about the Bar Cube. I haven't committed to the Cubioki yet because, yeah.
I want to.
Well, you better sign up. And then there's also the rotisserie draft, too, that I heard about, too, that's going down that's pretty sick. It's our good friend Aqua One that's graciously provided their powered vintage cube to open up for a select amount of players to draft that. And that's a pay-to-play situation, but you can get that with the CubeCon Lite ticket as well, too, right?
It is. You can get in on it. That's absolutely right. So with our friend Aqua, you all saw his cube last year, I'm sure.
Who I referred to as Aqua One, like Air Force One, for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah. He's insured this cube for, I forget the exact number, but it's something like $990,000 or something.
Whew.
It's like the $1 million cube, you all. Every single card is altered in this cube. Not only is it altered, but it's altered by the original artist and typically signed by the original artist. Some artists like Christopher Rush are no longer with us, rest in peace, but he has, altered all these cards and signed all these cards. It's a powered cube, and it is just the most gorgeous, impressive cube. It's amazing. And we are going to have a roto draft of that on Thursday, October 19th, and people can sign up for this raffle. It's free to sign up for the raffle. Anybody can sign up for the thing, and then we'll draw names and create a pod. Then there is a cost associated with, participating in this pod. But then you get to roto draft the thing, and roto's amazing. And this entire gorgeous, gorgeous cube is going to be laid out one card at a time across the tables. And you'll get to stand there, right, and be like picking cards and making your deck. It's going to be super cool.
We have a conflict though. We're firing Uber Bear's two-headed giant cube on the same day. It's worth about $98.
I've always had a bit. I will say I've always had a bit of a problem with the rotisserie draft name. Right, it's on a board. It's all laid out. Surely the charcuterie.
Are you thinking of Boston Market?
No, I'm thinking the charcuterie draft would be a much better name, right?
I don't see the cards roasting on a spit. I'm not
I want my cheese and my salami and my crackers, right? So
charcuterie draft. We're relabeling it.
Aqua's going to freak out if you start trying to roast his cube on a spit. It seems like.
And I will not.
We love you, Aqua. All right, the next one this is kind of the ding, ding, ding. I don't have a bell. Boop, boop, boop. All right, we're moving over to the Enchantment Matters section of the Cartographic Cube that's going to be featured on MTGO. What were the dates again, by the way, John?
September 27th through October 4th, 2023. That's not long.
That's only a week.
So this is your primer. You're
getting in on it.
You're getting inside information, peeps, on how to play this cube. So let's talk about some of the cards in the enchantment section, the third part of the trifecta, right? And I want to kind of talk about this first card that I have signaled in the show notes. Heliod, the Radiant Dawn, for 2 colorless and 2 planes, legendary enchantment creature god. When Heliod the Radiant Dawn enters the battlefield, return target enchantment card that isn't a god from your graveyard to your hand. Really plays into that whole enchantments matters, right? But then you can also do for 3 colorless and 1 Phyrexian blue mana, transform Heliod the Radiant Dawn, activate only as a sorcery, flips over, becomes Heliod the Warped Eclipse. Legendary enchantment creature Phyrexian god again, 4/6. You may cast spells as though they had flash. Spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each card your opponents have drawn this turn. Love this card. Really signals what you're trying to do here. And it's kind of the hallmark for the finisher, in my opinion, in this cube for that environment, for the particular archetypes, for the enchantment archetype. What are your thoughts on that, John?
Yeah, this is a super cool new card. Honestly, I was torn between whether I wanted to run the new version, which is from the Brothers War? Or no, it's from March of the Machines. Yes? March of the Machines.
Heliod the Radiant Dawn is from March of the Machines, yeah.
Yeah. I was torn between this and the OG version from Theros because it's also a legendary enchantment creature god and so on. So it does the enchantments thing. And that version, you can pay 2 white to create an enchantment creature of some sort. I don't remember its type. And it's like a 2/1 maybe enchantment creature. So that's cool because you get to trigger the enchantments. I mean, you could have things that trigger whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, right? So that's kind of nice. So it was kind of a toss-up between these 2 versions of the card, but I like this card a lot. It allows you to recur enchantments, so that's sweet. It flips, and it's this big, like, finisher kind of card that has other benefits. And honestly, it's a newer card, and this was another one of, not strictures exactly, Daybreak gave me, but Daybreak encouraged me to include new cards in our revision of Cartographia. So here's a card that's been published in the last year. I worked this out. I think 28% of the cube is new compared to the 2022 version. So I have tried to put a bunch of cards published in the last year here in the environment. And this new Heliod, it fits like totally perfectly. So yeah, it's great.
Like butter
I
on
love
toast.
it. Yeah,
so when you say
sure.
new, is that your benchmark for new is cards that have been released in the past like 12 months or so.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Because Cartographia 2022 ran in October of 2022. So I was collecting cards, sorting through cards that have been published in the past year. So 28% of the cards in Cartographia 2023 have been published since October 2022.
So let's talk about some more of this glue, because this is what fascinates me as a curator. Again, taking the three components and then meshing them together. May, would you mind taking on Dryad of Elysian Grove, please?
Dryad of Elysian Grove is a 2 and a green for an enchantment creature, Nymph Dryad, for a 2/4. You may play additional lands on each of your turns. Lands you control are every basic land type in addition to those types. It's going to be an interesting card for a lot of those land types matters domain decks, and it adds a lot of overlap with green and any other domain decks that care about lands.
Yeah, I love the fact that it
that's
hits
amazing.
domain.
All of a sudden,
Yeah.
I mean, you could be in a 2-color deck, and then poof, you've got like 5-color domain.
It's like a chromatic lantern on rails. I love the fact that it's a walking chromatic lantern. I'm a huge fan of this card, and the fact that it's an enchantment binds that idea. It loves lands, and it really acts as glue to pull your different archetypes together. So I'm a huge fan of that. What do you think about that, Stu?
Yeah. I mean, I love this card. It's, again, going back to that domain archetype that's in there. This is a very, very easy enabler for those domain, right? If this is in your opening hand and you've got, the territorial Kavu or Scion of Draco in your hand. And let me actually quickly, as we're doing this, we might as well just cover those very quickly, right? So this, again, does, in my opinion, tie in so nicely with the domain. So Scion of Draco is a 12 colorless for a 4/4, but it has domain, so it costs 2 less for each basic land type among lands you control. So potentially that's, pretty cheap. Couple of mana. For a flyer, 4/4, and each creature you control has vigilance if it's white, hexproof for blue, lifelink for black, first strike for red, and trample for green. And then territorial Kavu is just a red-green domain. Whenever it attacks, choose one, discard a card if you do draw a card, and exile up to one, exile up to one target card from a graveyard. And actually, its power and toughness is equal to the number of basic land types among lands you control. So literally, you fetch for a Triome, turn 1, turn 2, you play this with a Sharkland, you got a 5/5 on turn 2.
Yeah.
Very, very, very powerful card.
Yeah, I love that.
Or you've got a Scion of Draco, as you quite rightly pointed out, on turn 2, and you've got this 4/4 flyer that then makes all your other stuff better. And that is not a pipe dream. This isn't magical Christmas land in this particular environment. It's, a real aspiration that on turn 2 you can power out the Scion of Draco or your 5/5 Kavu. Yeah, that's absolutely right.
And I do love me some
super cool.
Love me some dirty aggro.
And so, John, you've actually created curator glue is what we're going to coin this as. You've done a good job of finding cards that pull together the 3 different silos, the trifecta, and have just made them one. So I'm a huge fan of that in the design process. Would you mind taking away, John, this final card? Good luck, John.
Anecthea, Hand of Erebos. So this is 2 white, black, green. So it's 5 mana in junk colors. For a legendary enchantment creature, Demigod. It's a 4/4, has menace. Other enchantment creatures you control have menace. Whenever Anecthea enters the battlefield or attacks, exile up to 1 target non-aura enchantment card from your graveyard. Create a token that is a copy of that card, except it's a 3/3 black zombie creature in addition to its other types.
Spicy.
Yeah, spicy card.
Spicy.
This is one of the rare 3-color cards that I've only introduced now into the environment. They didn't appear at all in 2022 because gold cards, you guys, I mistrust them. Yeah, but this one's great. It does a lot of stuff, and so as you say, it ties the room together like Lebowski's rug. And let me just say that there are some environments in which people devote themselves to signpost cards that exist in 2-color pairs, and that makes perfect sense. And you create an environment in which you've got effectively like 10 different strategies, and each of the 2 color pairs is trying to point drafters towards that particular strategy. So that's a fine way of approaching Cube. That's the like modern masters kind of approach, where you've got like a fairies deck and you've got a Saprolines deck, and so anyway, that is a way that you can absolutely do it. In this particular environment, I've got like the 3 major buckets, and then we can have all of these subcategories within those buckets. I want those buckets to be represented across the entirety of the color pie, such that one doesn't feel as if they've taken the, is it card, and now we're on rails and we have to pick all of the goblins or whatever the thing is and like do the is it thing. So the glue cards, as you all are quite rightly pointing out, are incredibly important to me, to allowing the entirety of the color pie to be dipping into the major strategies that we're trying to support in the cube, and giving drafters then more choice, more freedom, and allow them to do artifacts in red and white, or to do artifacts sort of improbably in black and green, right? To do lands matters in a domain sense where we're trying to draft all 5 colors, or to do a lands matters thing that's green X and that cares about destroying your own lands and creating creatures, or like getting the lands back from the graveyard and so on. So yeah, this is a great card that you've called out that allows us to bridge lots of different colors and lots of different archetypes.
I felt like I had great agency with it, and you and I spoke about this with the draft. You specifically said that you felt that agency was so strongly represented, right, and that you were able to pick good lanes and pick cards that you wanted to draft, and there was no funneling, right? That you felt that the draft felt very comfortable for you, and you're like obviously just gifted when it comes to cube and drafting anyway. But you mentioned that it just felt very comfortable and very fun for you to draft.
Yeah,
which kind of leads me into our final thoughts, right? And the cross-pollination, what John has intentionally done with Cartographia in 2023 and before, is to ensure that all portions of the cube find ways to merge, right? It's a robust environment. You're not going to get put on rails. And I will say this of Uberbear's Horror Cube. One of the problems that I faced as a curator is there's vampires, werewolves, there's typal matters, right? He's done kind of a very 40,000 foot in the air type of curation design aspect where it's typal-esque, right? It's lands, enchantments, artifacts, but found a way to bridge those gaps with cards like All That Glitters, etc., that really bind those, the typal glue, if you will.
I think that's where you can have so much fun with it, and I think that's where maybe the typal sort of design space that you've got with the Horror Cube, where it is werewolves and vampires and so on and so forth, those are they can be a little more difficult to meld together in a functioning cube, whereby, and again, what you've done with the Cartographia cube, which is so fun, is you've got those 3 buckets, as you so elegantly put, but you've been able to sort of meld them together and have so many cards in there that allow you so much agency and so much freedom to not just, hey, I've got this lane and I really need X card and X card to be able to make things work. There's so much fun to be had and so much synergy that you can bring together that isn't just specifically in this one archetype or lane that you're going for.
I really like that. I think I don't like as a drafter, I don't like feeling as if I get driven into a lane and then I just have to pick all of the cards of type X, or the cards that say whatever on them, or even the cards that have, this color or that color attached to it. And so that is a challenge when you're going in for a super typal environment. And this is a challenge that May, for instance, has navigated with aplomb via the introduction of changelings into the Fey Cube, right? Which then providing precisely the glue that you all have been describing that lets you mix and match to some extent, or that expands the pool that's available to you within sort of typal structure, or a structure that cares about thing X. So I love that.
My final question, my final curveball is you've got 2023 past you. What are you looking forward to make Cartographia better in 2024? What's the new concepts you really want? What's the dream?
Yeah, more lands. Give me more lands. Give me more lands that do things. It's kind of a tough sell this time. So looking back at 2023, the stuff that's been published lately, I've taken some of the new creature lands from Wilds of Eldraine, so that's cool. I like 4 out of 5 of those new creature lands that are in 2 colors, that fix for 2 colors, so that's great. But I want more lands that do super cool things, that are MDFC or that just have these other modes. I love that we got more of those in our return to Kamigawa. We have a bunch of new lands that do super sweet things. That's cool. Anyway, I feel like this is an environment that's designed around lands from the jump, as we have discussed at great length. But in the past few years, I've been getting more artifacts and enchantments. And like the lands have been like falling by the wayside to some extent, which is a sadness to me. So, I mean, more of them.
I was a little sad that WoW didn't reintroduce the utility lands with the basic land types, but it's fine.
All right, so time for John to do his plugs about the amazing things. Let's talk about the Cultic Bestiary. Let's get to that. What does the Cultic Bestiary offer to the listeners?
Cultic Bestiary is a suite of tokens that I've been creating for the past maybe 3 years. I've got more than 200 unique token designs now, and they are all done in the style of medieval illuminated manuscripts. And I mean, this project is a joy to me. I'm a professor of English. I'm teaching even now a medieval literature class. We're doing Gawain and the Green Knight at the moment. Just got finished with that today. So this is a project that's like near and dear to my heart. I love illuminated manuscripts. So I've brought those to your magic table, and this is available on Etsy at culticcube.etsy.com. So you should definitely check it out. It's a sweet project, I think.
They're my favorite tokens.
They're my favorite tokens. They're conversation starters. Yeah.
Awesome.
Oh yeah, I have to actually order some more of those 2-3 vampires for that weird Soren.
I need the vampires because
I already ordered some, but I need more. I don't know where they're at. They're missing.
Anthony stole
Somebody
all mine,
steal. So people steal your Cultic Bestiary. That's happening. So the next one is, where can they find Jed on YouTube?
Yeah, I'm Cultic Cube at YouTube. I've been making YouTube content for a good while, and the focus is absolutely cube design, cube play, cube theory. So this is my passion. This is what I'm here for. And I'm also one of the organizers of CubeCon, as we've discussed. So everybody's in on that. We've got this additional pass that we've opened up now that will let people who weren't able to get a pass earlier get in on the fun. And we have a merch store now as well that you can find through our website. I've been doing a lot of work doing the graphic design for CubeCon this year. So I've made like our playmats and our tokens. And here's a secret, you all. May is going to be featured on a token that's going to be available at CubeCon 2023. Yeah, because May is super awesome, and she's also going to be involved in a game show that we're putting on at CubeCon this year.
Do not miss
I'm
it.
super looking forward to that. Yeah.
My mind will be twisted.
Yeah, that's right. We're calling it Mind Twist. I think it's going to be super cool.
And then the Cartographia
CubeCon,
Cube is kind of our summary here. It's comes out what dates again? So where can players find this at? Because this cube is absolutely gorgeous. We are blessed and fortunate to have play tested it amongst UberCube here and others. And what are the dates, John?
September 27th through October 4th, 2023. It will be available on Magic the Gathering online. So you should totally go draft it and create data for me.
Yes. And it's a Cube Cobra. I will say
Give me your data.
Check
Give me your data. This
Check
cube is
out-
also, by the by, going to be in paper available to be drafted at CubeCon 2023. So draft the photo and then come to CubeCon and play it in paper. It's going to be awesome.
And a shout out, well, If you're looking to draft this in paper or on Modo, go check out the list. It's at cubecobra.com/cube/overview/cartographia 2023. It's got a ton of cool information, all the cards, all the information that you need to just 6030. You're going to do it. John, tell us about where can we reach you? Twitter. Tell us about the socials. Where can people reach out to you?
Yeah, I'm at Cultic Cube on Twitter, so absolutely reach out to me there. culticcube@gmail.com. So yeah, love to hear from you. Love chatting Cube with people, and Cube is my passion, and Cube is something that I am incredibly invested in developing in the community, because I think that this is such a fun, creative outlet for people, both as designers and also as drafters. So I very much want to support everybody in making Cube happen all around the world. And this is why I'm involved in not only content production on YouTube and so on, but also, CubeCon. This is important to me. So love hearing from fellow Cube nuts.
Well, CubeCon, let's talk about that. Again, we have Year 2 of CubeCon in Madison, Wisconsin, USA, from October 19th to the 22nd. If you don't have tickets, go and check it out. We'd love you to come and hang out with us. Do some cube drafting, whatever your format of choice might be. Come hang out. There's so many cool events and all the vendors and all the fun activities that are going on. I've been to a few Magic events, and this one is it's the best. I mean, let's just face it. It's the best Magic event on the calendar. Say no more.
And I have a special announcement. I recently just became an admin for MTG Cube Drafting on Facebook, right? And so the reason why I mention that is because 682 different drafters. And most of these people are actually new to Cube. They want to learn about Cube. And it's an opportunity for people to join and help them build their first cube. It's a very friendly place to do that. So just wanted to mention that, do a shout out for me. All right, keep going, Stu.
No, I think that's very important. Look, it's on Facebook, which is, everyone should have most people should have a Facebook account by now. If you don't, go get a Discord account and come hang out with us on our Cube. But if you do, come check us out on the Cube Facebook group. Right, there's a lot of cool discussion going on there. And Anthony's the admin, so it's very important for him. He's not on a power trip at all. I
probably will let you in.
Totally not going to just ban you for his ego or anything like that. So anyway, as always,
thank you so much for joining us on the show. We're always happy to have you here, and we are very, very grateful to have you on the show and talk about your cube.
Thank you, May.
Well, thank you all so much. This has been a total treat. Long-time listener, first-time caller. So I very much appreciate you having me here. This is an honor. And I really appreciate you all's wonderful playtesting of Cartographia and excellent advice. And as well, you all know, you all made an enormous impact on the environment, and that will make people's experience all the awesomer when they log into MTGO at the end of September and beginning of October and play Cartographia. They're going to know UberCube was there and giving great advice and feedback leading into this environment. So
casting
thank you
those
all.
walking ballistas for
We appreciate
free.
you too. Anthony,
well, that's what we're
would you
here
like
for,
to move
right?
on to the socials?
Listen, we're here for the positive vibes for the community, and we first of all, thank you to John for coming on and hanging out with us today and giving us so much great insight into not just this cube, but as we always love so much, getting this feedback from the curators out there, especially the famous ones that we have on our show and the guests that we have. It's so wonderful to get this information and get this feedback from you guys. We appreciate your time today. It really has been great to speak to you. Hey,
and for being our biggest supporter.
If
If it wasn't for John, our little podcast was struggling on the Twitters, right? And I want to say a special thank you as a friend for really retweeting us often, for looking out for us, getting us out there, just allowing us to be heard.
For sure.
I'm really honored to be part of this circle and enjoying the fact that I get to be your friend. So it's amazing.
First of all, we want to give a huge shout out to Preston and Sam, our two patrons. We really appreciate you guys and the ongoing support. And for all the listeners out there, if you have enjoyed this show, we would really appreciate, go on and give us a 5-star review on your podcast platform. Really helps us get out there and reach out more to the Cube community. You can also support the channel with our Ultra Sleeves affiliate link. Go to ultrasleeves.com/UberCube to get 5% off your purchase. And also, if you want to support us, you can also use our Ink Gaming affiliate link. Go check them out. They've got some really cool playmats, dice bags, mouse pads, all that kind of stuff. All kinds of cool products to bling out your cube or maybe your commander deck, but hopefully your cube. But yeah, go check them out. Some really cool stuff there. And that's right. As always, you can reach out to us at Twitter. We are at UberCubeMTGPod. You can also email us. We are UberCubeMTGPodcast@gmail.com. And please come check us out on our Discord, #UberCube. Lots of cool conversations going about this cube, the Cartographia cube, Anthony's cubes, and everything cube related. We love to hang out and talk with you guys. And finally, Anthony, the Patreon's kind of taken off a little bit, right?
Yeah, I got no more memes. We got real Patreons now.
All right. Well, that's good to know. Well, we thank you to our patrons for your ongoing support. And as always, we're going to do here what we do at the end of all of our episodes and say Happy Cubing.
Cartographia, let's go.
There you go.